Hey folks, thanks for hanging around. Glad to be able to share with you a little more depth and tutorial-esque type of instruction involving the 3 movements that I wrote about in the Linchpin article. Real simply put, both of these first 2, actually first 3, are some collaborations and then really classic implementations that I've done with both myself and my clients, and stuff that Josh Hinken, the Master RKC, and I have worked upon together. What we're going to start with first is a great way to extend the range of motion. Oftentimes, and I think it's probably part of the reason that the kettlebell clean has kind of been placed in a secondary role, is that it's a very short range of motion and it's looked upon as a positional lift, only to get us into position and not used as an actual exercise. By extending the range of motion to the dead stop, we almost double that range of motion. We can work on that power production, a little more strength component. Going from the dead stop, we can definitely load up into those heavier range kettlebells, those 32 and up, maybe even in that 48 range kettlebell, and work from that dead stop position. Working on that really pure hip hinge, still working on finding great position, and then ending up in that rack position, which is the definition. It's not the common way that the kettlebell has been used, but the definition of clean is to bring something from the ground position to a rack position, and that is the definition of clean. So we're going to start real simply here with the dead stop. Setting up nice and behind, so not necessarily going to do the pre-hike position piece, but starting up, I like to start behind because it allows us a chance to drive into that hinge. So really that down position of the hinge is a really critical position in my mind, and allows us to start up with a great setup as opposed to some of the buckling that might happen in that regard. So here as such, nice and solid, I've loaded up as posterior chain, and then I've just got to come up into that position. You can see that's quite a difference. We do almost, in our live setting training, we do almost all of our work from the dead stop position. So here, very easily able, the stronger you get, you can do that. So simply put, if you don't have many kettlebells around, one of the great things you can do is you can just increase that range of motion, a great progressive overload aspect that's often overlooked. Next position, this is probably one of my favorites. We're currently using this right now in one of our 3, 6, 9, 12 live trainings because we're adding complexity. We don't want to have to use too many or too large kettlebells, is the inside out rotational clean. Now let me be very clear on this. The rotational aspect of this movement is from the internal rotation of the trailing hip. It's still a hip hinge, all things still combined. Again, a great way to get some more mileage, but again, you can load this up pretty significantly. So I'm internally rotating my left hip. I'm going to hinge into my right. Kettlebell set up right next to the mid step, if you will, of my right foot, and I'm driving from this right hip. I'm kind of loaded up and packed that left shoulder and come up into position. Just that same lockout or hip extension, that tall piece that you see in all your other hinge movements, you're going to come to the top and then internal rotate. I can't stress how critical being active on this foot is. It is still doing work, although it allows us to make this exercise be a little more single leg typed, if you will. So here, loading up my right hip, it's my driver and my decelerator along with internal rotation. Great, great drill. I would highly encourage you to give it a try to break out of that really sagittal plane based hip hinge type of movement and moving through a plane of motion with the hip hinge. I think it's highly valuable for us to experience. Lastly, for those of you that like doubles, just going into the double kettlebell cleat, you can do this one of both ways. You can do that fluid style that many of you are probably really familiar with, or you can do it from the dead stop. I like the dead stop in this position just so we can quantify and look at those quality endpoints, whether it's coming out of that bottom position or ending up in that tall racked position at the end. Stagger position though is a little bit different. I know there's some different verbiage of it, but the stagger position is very critical into some of the different aspects that many people look at. The staggered is heel toe, right? Looks pretty similar to some of the things you may see. But the real critical component is we're going to always keep that trailing heel off the ground. Let me move back a little bit and see if you can make sure you can see that. The trailing heel is always going to be off the ground. We're still going to have our normal stance, and we're just going to drive, again, dominantly off that back leg. Although that trail foot And ball of foot should be active. It's not just passive hanging out back there, it's still active. And we're gonna drive off the hinge and then subsequent extension out of that left hip. So let's take a look from dead stop position here as such. Here, we'll load it up. So as you can see, great way to get some mileage out of those lighter kettlebells. Won't exactly be kind of a double the weight instance, but even a pair of 20s like that, we can get up to 40 kilos very quickly, working off that more single leg. The pressure in regards to that stagger position is about 70, 30, 60, 40. 70 or 60% on that front leg, 30 or 40% on that back leg. So there you have it. The clean variations, or the linchpin variations of the kettlebell clean, that hopefully allow you to gain some more usage, implementation of not only your lighter kettlebells, but starting to move in some different ways that kettlebells really lend themselves to. If you have any questions, obviously reach out, but hopefully this has been really valuable to you and kind of let you look at kettlebells and kettlebell cleans in a slightly different light. Have a great one. We'll talk to you very soon.